Next up, we have Dr. Bryan Haycock. Did you know that when you're deficient in nutrients, that your body's ability to absorb them goes up? The body's very intelligent. It's looking for them. And this has an impact on what supplements you should take, or maybe even sometimes you shouldn't be taking supplements. Bryan Haycock is a researcher. He spent a lot of time and a lot of years looking at varying aspects of the body, how it interacts with supplements and nutrients, and what kinds of things we need to know. Also, he's got an opinion on the organic thing. Many of our experts weigh in on that. Is it important to have organic supplements? Is it not important? Should you spend the extra money? I've seen varying opinions on this. You're going to get one in this interview also. So enjoy this. There's a lot of great content, deep information here from a person who is an eminent expert in this arena, Dr. Bryan Haycock. So Bryan, looking forward to our conversation. Many things said about you in anticipation, but two of which are, number one, you're the man to talk to about supplementation, and number two, you're overly humble. So,
there's no response for that. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly. He's arrogant if he talks
Right.
speaks with authority, and he's
If
humble
I deny
if he
it,
doesn't.
I'm being humble. Yeah.
So we'll see how to get all this great information out of you and still keep your comfort zones in the meantime. So how'd you get involved in the world of supplementation?
Well, professionally, I got started while I was in college. I had a natural curiosity for the body and nutrition, and both on the pharmaceutical side and on the dietary supplement side. And of course, when you get into college, you have your opportunity to dig in as deep as you want. In an effort to make money, I thought I might see if anybody had any need for somebody who just read dietary supplement, studies all day. And in fact, there were companies who sell dietary supplements need what are called substantiation portfolios. So when they make a claim about their product, they, according to the FDA, you need 2 double-blind placebo-controlled studies that would qualify as evidence to support your claim. So I was able to use my time at the university and the medical libraries working for companies who are selling products, making claims about those products. I could then go to the library, look up the data, see if there's any research on it, and as a contractor, put those portfolios together and send them to them.
Was that fulfilling work for you?
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes it worked out really well. There was great products making great claims. At other times, there were other companies with bad products making bad claims, and there's literally nothing to support their claims. And you feel a lot of pressure when you're supposed to be providing the support for claims, and they don't realize or aren't particularly concerned with the fact that there isn't really support for the claims.
Is that a little bit backwards? I mean, is it supposed to be
Yes,
first
you're
you figure out
supposed
what
to.
you got, and then you go out and you're
Yes,
saying,
it
hey,
is.
here's our claim, go make it valid.
It is absolutely backwards, and you have all kinds in the industry, about the industry, and I don't want to get on a tangent if it is one, but there are low barriers to entry in the industry. You really don't need to know about dietary supplements or regulations or even human nutrition. There are contract manufacturers who can give you a turnkey solution. They will design the product, formulate the product, create a label for you, and even handle logistics for shipping and put up a website for you. All you have to do is bankroll it. So depending on their whims, they can sell products that really aren't very good products.
So this is interesting. So you referred to this as a low barrier to entry, and I guess this is one of the things that creates the, I'll call it the chaos in the supplement
Yeah, it's
industry.
a Wild West.
It's
Yeah,
a Wild
it is.
West chaos where somebody say, hey, I want to enter this arena. I'm a marketer. I'm a great marketer.
Yes.
Now I need a product.
Right.
And I can go to a contract manufacturer and say, can you formulate something in this
I want
realm?
something that does this.
Yeah. And are they pretty much, are the formulators usually people of some expertise at least? Or
Well, whether they're of any expertise or not at these contract manufacturers, they aren't liable for the product. The person who's selling the product, putting it on the shelf, is who's ultimately liable for the claims that are being made.
Can they and this is actually a very interesting question. Can the person who is hiring the contract manufacturer piggyback on their liability policies?
No.
So they become responsible then
Yeah,
completely.
they are responsible for it ultimately because they are the ones who put it in front of the public.
Yeah.
to get the money for the product based on the claims.
So this leads to another question, which is the regulation side of this. Because people say, because we described it as Wild Wild West from the business context of
Right.
it, but certainly there are some regulatory parameters around this industry that do apply. It's not completely unregulated, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest misconceptions about the dietary supplement industry is that it is not regulated. That's the groupthink. That's the public notion.
Right.
So it's a difficult one to battle because you will continually hear the message that it isn't, in fact, regulated.
And that's the risk. It's an unregulated industry. But
Right.
reality,
That's the argument against that. You can't trust the manufacturers. You can't trust the products. They could be dangerous. You have no idea what's in them. All of these claims aren't, in fact, true.
Yeah, so digging into that a little further, I mean, maybe it's the fact that it's not regulated like the pharmaceutical industry in a sense of, what FDA requires.
You're exactly right.
And but nonetheless, there's the Federal Trade Commission that warrants that you have to tell the truth about what's in your thing and what claims you make about it.
That's right. There's an interesting differences between the way pharmaceuticals are regulated and the way dietary supplements are regulated. Pharmaceuticals are regulated on a cost-benefit or a risk-benefit analysis. So in order for a drug company to bring a new drug to market, they have to do the clinical trials and present the evidence that this drug will in fact do what the company is claiming that it will do. But in the process, should that drug cause depression, suicide, even death, uncontrollable movements that may become permanent. You've heard all these in this fine print on commercials. It's okay as long as the benefit is deemed adequate to balance that risk. So you can have what I would call a meaningful percentage of patients that would experience life-altering side effects during these drug trials, but it would still get approved. For a dietary supplement, there can be zero risk. On the other hand, you do not have to prove its efficacy. And that's the trade-off.
Interesting.
So the FDA says, okay, if you're going to sell a drug that may kill people, you at least have to demonstrate that it will do something.
Right.
So that everybody involved can at least claim, yes, but it does this thing for you. It adds, a month of life.
Hence, it becomes a legend drug saying you have to have an expert that gives this to you. You just can't go buy it off a shelf.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. For dietary supplements, there can be no risk. And the way dietary supplements are introduced to the market, the FDA has to be notified 70 days in advance that a product is going to be introduced to the market. 30 days before it's put there, the claims that are going to be made for it have to be submitted to the FDA, and then you can market the product. All during that procedure, the FDA does not respond to you with a accepted and approved kind of letter. It's simply, we've received your submission. And that is done so that they can, at some time in the future, at their discretion, take the product off the market should they deem that it is not a safe product. So they never, you still have to submit what you're going to introduce to the market. They don't approve it, and then they can, at their discretion, remove the product from the market should some later adverse event be reported that would generate enough concern that they would remove the product.
So in essence, it's a registration. Right?
It's a registration.
So you're just saying we're registering it. We don't have to wait for any particular approval from you, but you know that we're transacting this business.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, and you had mentioned the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission work together with the FDA. The FDA is mostly concerned with protecting the public's health, protecting the public from harm. And the FTC is primarily concerned with false claims, claims that might be misleading in some way. And for dietary supplements, that includes implied claims. So if you make a claim, let's say, for example, that this product supports heart health, you're implying that it would prevent a heart attack or some high blood pressure or whatnot, even though that's not what you're claiming. A reasonable person might interpret that claim to mean such.
Right.
And the FTC requires you to have substantiation not only for the claim that you're making, but also to be able to support whatever implied claims an individual might be gathering from what you're saying.
Now, this is very interesting because many of the supplements on the market, especially ones that are sold like on TV and so on, that are, let's say there aren't, human trials,
Right.
substantiating a specific, outcome or specific effect. Normally, that's what they'll say. Well, it supports, liver health, supports, et cetera. But you're saying that there's implied claims there, so they still need some evidence to say that it is supportive in those realms. Like take a milk thistle, for example, and,
Yeah.
and liver health.
Right.
A lot of people say this supports, healthy liver function.
Right.
But what would be their burden to say that this is true, or that's an implied claim that they can get away
that's
with
a
it?
good question, because there is no burden until there's a challenge. So they can sell as much of the product as they wish, making any kind of claims they wish, until there's a challenge either from the FDA or the FTC. But lo and behold, today, the number of cases that are brought against companies from the FDA are almost nil, because of the current regulations that are in place. The Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act has given the FDA enough control over how those products are manufactured and marketed. Everybody must comply, and by definition of regulation, if you do not comply, you go to jail. I would call that regulation,
Yes,
right?
that's definitely regulated, yeah.
And the FTC is looking for misleading claims, but they don't get involved a lot because it's literally a lack of resources. Okay, so the laws are there, but they're not being adequately enforced. And this is where class actions come in.
Yeah.
So the biggest risk to any dietary supplement company as far as their claims go is actually from class action, not from the FTC, not from the FDA.
That's interesting.
The only real players in the industry that are at risk from FTC and FDA are the very large companies that are, 500 million plus per year in revenue from these products. Usually you'll find the products in food, drug, and mass channels, not internet, not direct to consumer, not multi-levels. Because if the FDA and the FTC is going to get involved, they know that if they were to move against a large, most of the time multinational type of company, these consumer packaged goods companies that buy the supplement brands for the supermarket and that it will send a wave of precaution throughout the industry, and one move against a large company really slows everybody down.
Reverberates.
Right?
Yeah.
It reverberates
Yeah.
and has a big impact. One, if they were to try to go after the fly-by-night kind of internet companies, start up, take your money, disappear.
Yeah.
One, it's like whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
There's literally no way to regulate that. And two, that there isn't even enough manpower to devote towards that.
Right.
And that is the inevitable, buyer beware nature of dietary supplements. And any consumer can be advised in such a way as to learn how to avoid those types of companies and avoid those types of products.
And that's the advice we want to give them.
Right.
So, given the regulatory side of the manufacturing of supplements, et cetera, there's countless amounts of supplement brands out there. Everything from, like they said, the small little ones on an internet site to, billion-dollar plus supplement companies.
Yes.
How many manufacturers are there, or is there just a small amount of manufacturers making like 90% of the supplements on the market under different labels?
As far as the products themselves, there's actually more of a limited number of ingredient suppliers.
Ah, that's interesting. So we're going up a level from the manufacturer.
Yeah, you're going back to the source. There are very large companies that are supplying ingredients to a large percentage of all dietary supplement marketers.
Can we give an example like fish oil? Like, are there just a few fish oil
There are
people?
actually just a few fish oil companies. And that's why when people come to me and they say, oh, which one should I pick? I say,
They're not
it's
that
not going to
different.
matter. It's really not going to matter.
Right.
But, even within those channels, the supply channels, you do want to ensure that you have a quality supply channel, traceability back to the source and each of the stages in which that ingredient has traveled before it ends up at the manufacturing facility. Also, countries of origin. It used to be, of course, that ingredients from China were always suspect. Several years ago, we had the melamine fiasco in baby formulas, where it's not a real protein, but being counted as a protein content in those products. Since then, however, China has felt the impact of that reputation, the damage that comes from that, and has really stepped up. And many ingredient suppliers in China now are GMP compliant according to U.S. standards.
Interesting.
And a lot, of course, the manufacturers are demanding that. There's been some improvements in India as well, China and India being the largest supply countries to the dietary supplement industry.
Wow, so those are the two largest suppliers of source elements for supplements, is
Yes.
China and India.
Yes.
Interesting.
And that's because of economies of scale, right? They can produce tremendous amounts of this material at pennies on the dollar compared to, for example, Europe or the United States. And that's where you kind of get some boutique products, right, that will say, well, we refuse any ingredients for this country or that country. We will only accept ingredients from this country and that country. And they're certainly free to do that, but consumers need to know that it isn't necessarily that you're getting a higher quality product, you're just spending more for it.
Right.
If a company is, in fact, GMP compliant, and according to GMP regulations, the company who's going to make the product with that ingredient does all the necessary testing to prove that it is, in fact, 99%, whatever it says it is, free of contaminants, free of microbials, free of all that. It's literally no different than a more expensive source for that ingredient.
So let's review those variables for a second. So we're saying we've got the source elements coming in. That's one variable. The second one is the person or the manufacturer who receives these source elements.
Yes.
Now, you're saying that manufacturer should have some of their own lab testing to validate that the source elements...
They are required by law.
Oh, they're required. Okay.
By law.
It's not even an option.
Yes,
Okay.
they must do identity testing. And
So you can feel good then that if there's a Chinese manufacturer who's claiming GMP, and again, I would always be suspect at this point because of just what's happened in the past, but it's secondarily validated by, let's say, the American manufacturer who says, hey, we're taking the source element and formulating, and we're going to validate that what they say is really
right.
here. Okay.
Because the FDA will not allow an American manufacturer to go, oh, but we didn't know, we took their word for it.
They're responsible no
That
matter
does
what.
not fly.
Okay.
Right? So,
Can't point fingers.
No,
Yeah.
no. The manufacturer is absolutely responsible for what's put into that product, regardless of where it was sourced.
Interesting.
So, according to law, again, this is part of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act that was implemented in 1994. There's a long, of course, list. There's positions at supplement companies that your sole job is to check the manufacturing and go down the list that everybody's compliant with these good manufacturing practices. And you will be randomly audited as well by FDA.
Yeah, so this is, I think you're speaking to, again, on a deeper level, very regulated. I mean, that's
Yes, it is.
That's some pretty, deep compliance, for people to make these supplements and be able to distribute them in the United States.
Again, and so that relates to safety, right? And what I would call purity or sanity. You know that it wasn't made in somebody's garage, right?
Yeah.
This is made in a sterile environment. And in fact, a large dietary supplement company that I worked for, not only were they GMP compliant, but they were drug compliant. So all the supplements were made under drug standards, which was slightly higher, and there's a number of differences in the facilities and the way materials are handled and recorded. But
when people use the term nutraceutical, is that what they're referring to?
no.
Okay, then that
That's
confuses
a
people,
very
though,
good
right?
question. But again, that regulation doesn't dictate that this product that you buy is going to do what it says on the label.
Right.
Now, if you're saying they aren't regulated for efficacy, that's fine. I have no argument with that. But to simply say you have no idea what's in it, could be dangerous, that's just false.
Okay. So is nutraceutical just kind of a made-up term?
It is. It was made up in the 90s to differentiate. So originally dietary supplements were, well, the first one was cod liver oil, right? In the 20s and 30s, knowledge about vitamins and minerals began to appear in academia. Okay, they began to identify vitamin A. Well, that's our first one. Vitamin B1, that's our first B vitamin, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And by the 30s, there was some public awareness of this notion of vitamins, right? And the first dietary supplement was a cod liver oil. And later, I think in maybe late 30s, early 40s, a company called Nutrilite introduced the first, what we would call a multivitamin product that was just dried juice from fruits and vegetables and pressed into a tablet.
Okay.
Right? And that was technically a dietary supplement. So today, things that fall under the category of dietary supplements are nutrients, and that's your vitamin, minerals, essential oils like omega-3s and other types of fats. Then you have what would be called herbal extracts or herbals, right? They have no nutritional value, but they have chemical constituents that have some sort of physiological effect on your body. And then you have other products that are what you would call metabolites. And these aren't necessarily essential nutrients, but they are products involved in human metabolism that could be a bottleneck for some desired training effect or whatnot. An example might be HMB. HMB is a leucine metabolite that isn't essential but has been found to have some impact on protein metabolism and whatnot. So you have those three different categories. Vitamins and minerals are not going to really harm you. There are, of course, your fat solubles that need to be watched for kids, to, not to take a bunch. But then you have the herbals and the herbal extracts, which are, in fact, chemicals no different, essentially, than a drug. It's just it's still in the plant, or it has been extracted to some standardized amount. And there really, essentially, is no difference between that type of chemical and a drug, except for what you can say about it. The FDA defines a drug not by what it does, but by how you describe it. Okay?
So what do you mean by that?
So vitamin C, for example, if I were to say vitamin C supports the immune system, it is a dietary supplement. If I were to say vitamin C reduces the incidence and duration of the common cold, it is now a new drug. And the FDA would say, oh, you're selling an unapproved new drug.
Right.
Cease and desist. Well, of course it's not a new drug. It's just vitamin C.
Right.
But the law is written according to the language that's used to sell it. And that's why on every dietary supplement product, you'll say this product was not intended to treat, mitigate, cure any disease.
So along those lines, just for clarity, they now have certain fish oils that are prescription fish
Yes.
oils, right?
Absolutely.
Now, if you were to lab test that prescription fish oil versus a normal fish oil that you might buy over the off the shelf,
Yes.
are they different?
No. and in fact, the same suppliers of those, well, it's very high concentration fish oil. It's
Right.
usually 85 to 90% omega-3s. That same material is marketed to supplement manufacturers for their products.
From the same
Identical.
source.
Same company.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's not even similar. It's identical.
It is identical. It's the same source.
So isn't it funny that there's a prescription, and so the only difference is the claims that are made
Right.
about the prescription,
Your
which make it a drug versus...
right, that's right.
okay,
Your prescription omega-3 will say lowers your triglycerides.
Right,
And your dietary supplement will say supports heart health.
right.
Same product.
Same product.
But of course, the pharmaceutical company, they're irked by the fact that this stuff is out there.
Right.
So it behooves them to put out messaging that dissuades people from buying them.
Right.
And so you say, well, they're dangerous, it's unregulated, you really don't want to.
And that's where
mess with
those
that.
flames get fanned a lot of times by the pharmaceutical industry.
Absolutely.
So that they can try to, grab more of the real estate attached to this, saying, hey, we do it on this level.
Right.
We're regulated.
You can only trust us.
Right. Right. Interesting. So now where we're at is that we have source materials, we have manufacturing practices, and then we have certain claims that are made. And a lot of the, hundreds of different brands of vitamins put out there are coming from just a handful of common sources in the beginning. Yet the price variation is extraordinary.
Yes.
So is there anything about the manufacturing process that would say this makes this worth more than this one, even though they have the same sources?
Yes, but not as a general rule. So there are expensive ways to extract chemicals from herbs. CO2 extraction, for example, is more expensive than a simple chemical extraction where you rinse it and, so you use solubility, whether it's water soluble or soluble in acetone or whatnot. So there are more expensive ways to extract chemicals from herbs, and that would essentially be reflected in the price of the raw material to the manufacturer of the product. However, if an ingredient is an ingredient, for let's say chromium, right? It's been around for a long time. Chromium is chromium. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Right.
As far as your body is concerned, chromium is chromium. But you do get into a situation where customers will develop a relationship of trust with a brand. And regardless of the cost differential, they want to stick with that brand. And that brand can ratchet up the price or introduce the brand at a higher price based on that knowledge that we can develop consumer trust and charge. Obviously, they're going to sacrifice volume, but they make up for it in margins.
Right.
So everybody that comes into the industry is going to have to choose, am I going to sell commodity products that have hundreds of competitors that are similar in the label and composition, or am I going to come out with what would call a premium product where I'm going to charge double and then have some sort of story behind it to justify the cost? In reality, the nutritional value of the products generally aren't closely related to the difference in cost.
But I have to imagine, I know there's varying stories. There's organic. Maybe there's organic sources that would have an impact.
Non-GMOs.
Non-GMOs.
Now,
That's another thing. I see now also something that's pretty popular is fermented. Things that are more alive, if you will, that are encapsulated. So
that's interesting and relates to trends.
So talk about that. When you say trends, are you saying that sometimes there's trends that are...
Well, it's like, where's the industry going? All of those things will add cost. For example, if a company wants to distribute in Europe as well as the United States, all products in Europe have to be non-GMO. Whereas in the U.S., no, it just depends on what they think their customer is looking for. That will significantly add to the cost because non-GMO, to have that certification, when you have a complicated supply chain, particularly anything that comes from corn, soy, the big commodity crops in the United States, particularly with corn, if you put a GMO crop next to a non-GMO crop, wind blows, lo and behold, now you have GMO on both crops.
Right.
Because that's just the nature of pollination and that kind of thing. It's just the nature of it. So, really proving that some of those commodity crops are non-GMO is extremely difficult in the United States. But again, that does add to the cost. The organic, of course, is going to add to the cost.
Sure.
Gluten-free doesn't add to the cost because very few things have gluten, but they throw it on there
throw it on
anyway,
there
just so it's gluten-free. Never had gluten in it, but...
So, in your view, do you think having organic and non-GMO supplements is worth the extra cost?
From a nutritional perspective, no. From a business model perspective, you are meeting supply and demand, and if the demand is that we demand this and this, well, you should get in line, or you're going to be falling back to the end.
But if you personally, if you're taking a supplement, you don't care if it's organic or not?
No.
Interesting. Okay. And then now the trend you're talking about, we were talking
Again,
about...
but I'm behind the scenes,
Yeah.
right? I'm behind the curtain. And due to the nature of my work, I'm swimming in this research all the time.
Right.
Swimming in the data from the organic proponents, the non-organic proponents, the non-GMO proponents, or, once you weigh all of the data, there aren't strong positions to take on either side. Reality is somewhere in the middle, a lot of uncertainties. It might be better for you, it might not. There's always the argument that organic produce is better for you. Well, it's possible that organic produce can be better for you, but the nature of the soil at the time that organic crop is planted isn't guaranteed to be in better shape than some other soil somewhere else. So you can start an organic farm in a place that has bad soil, and you're not going to have organic produce that is higher nutrients than a non-organic because the soil there is not great. Even though you've
There's
complied
no
with all the
pesticides, you
organic,
complied with
yeah,
the
it has
7
no
years of
pesticides and all
yeah,
that, but
yeah.
the nutritional value of the product is not going to be different, simply because it's determined on the soil, which varies around the country, around the world, even from year to year. So, in addition to that, there isn't enough land in the United States for all produce to be organic. We literally could not produce it because there's enough space. So organic becomes a luxury. And I'm not saying it's bad. And from the standpoint of protecting the environment, humane treatment of animals, I am all for organic. But there has to be some level of practicality to where the volume of food that this country demands can't be met with organic. So there's always only going to be a select few, a portion of the population who's going to have access to that. And that would be a luxury as opposed to, we're just not doing this because we're all, belligerent or whatever.
Right.
It's just a matter of practicality. It's just not possible.
And the other thing we talked about were trends, saying, okay,
Yeah.
so fermented nutrients as a trend.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the trends?
The microbiome. Okay, so the microbiome, technically the term microbiome refers to DNA. So it refers to all of the DNA that is not human DNA that is found in and on your body. We generally, in looser terms, refer to it as just all the bacteria, right? So your microbiome is the bacteria that's in and on your body. Before, I would say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the microbiome was really seen as kind of stowaway bacteria or just there for convenience, right? They found a place where they could live and they eat off our food and it doesn't bother us. Since then, the knowledge has changed and we realize that the microbiome is a fundamental component of human health, right? If you have a 3-legged stool, you have physical activity, you have nutrition, and then you have your microbiome. Those 3 components really are determining the health of the individual. And there are any number of reasons why the traditional Western diet and lifestyle has damaged over the generations the microbiome. Today we see more and more food sensitivities every year with kids and everything. You may say, well, what's all this gluten thing about? Why is everybody now sensitive to gluten? What did they do to the bread? It's like, well, they didn't do anything to the bread. The bread's the same bread it's always been. But the microbiome has lost its ability to regulate inflammatory reactions, sensitivities in our gut that normally would not be bothered by gluten of any kind and like that. So it's not that gluten has become bad for people, it's that people's microbiome has become dysbiotic, or they're in a state of dysbiosis.
And what causes that?
A reduced variety of food. Things that support the microbiome, first and foremost, are fibers from fresh fruits and vegetables, right? Things that damage the microbiome are high saturated fats, trans fats, sugar, high sugar loads, and, believe it or not, sedentary lifestyle, right? So what I described with high fat, sugar, and sedentary is a Western diet, essentially, devoid of fiber because people don't like the way fiber makes their hamburger buns feel in their mouths, right? So you rip all the fiber out and you have this wonderful
Gooey.
doughy bread,
Yeah,
right? As kids used to get bread and wad it up in the dough. Turns out as we've removed that in an effort to really maximize profits to get people to consume processed foods, our health has been damaged. And one of the primary areas of damage has been the microbiome. And eventually you get extinction of certain species of bugs that are good for you because there's just no support for them.
So how does the idea of fermented source nutrients in a supplement address that?
Well, fermentation, the process of fermentation is the same process that all those bugs do in your gut when you eat food. They ferment or metabolize the food for their own purposes. They eat it, right? After eating it, they release byproducts, metabolites, and even waste products that support the health of not only our gastrointestinal tract, but also play an important role in modulating our immune system, particularly inflammation and allergies. So the increase in asthma, peanut allergies, gluten, all of those things are now believed to be directly related to the microbiome.
Well,
And the solution is, yes, eat more fermented foods. You're getting essentially the beneficial, what they call small molecules from bacterial or sometimes yeasts, probiotic yeast metabolites in that fermented, whether it's a food like, kefir or yogurt or sauerkraut or kombucha, whatever it is, those beneficial components that are produced by those microorganisms, you're just putting them directly into your body. It's kind of like fertilizing a field with a truck or putting cows out there, right? If you put the bugs in, you're putting the cows out there. If you bring in the truck, well, you're eating a fermentate. But the fermentates are going to trend, not just because they're, right now you have a group of advocates that love everything fermented, right? If you can ferment it, do it. It's kind of like will it blend? I don't know. The guy puts everything. Will it blend? You throw it in there. We have the same type of mentality now. Can we ferment it?
yeah.
Which more power to them. It's absolutely good for you. It's good for kids, and no harm whatsoever. There may be limitations to live bacteria in the form of probiotics. One, the majority of them do not colonize permanently, so if they're not naturally there and they're not going to stay there, the benefits of them taking them only occur while you're taking them. Using a fermentate in addition to what would be called a prebiotic, which is a fiber that would feed good bacteria only, is going to be the normal and more effective strategy for improving the microbiome.
So with all these probiotics, because now we'll switch gears into that. That's a very popular category of a supplement right now is probiotics, and all the major supplement companies and some very minor ones are coming out with probiotics.
And big drug companies as well, who will not refer to them as probiotics to differentiate themselves from dietary supplement.
What do they call them?
Live microorganism.
Live micro. Okay.
But you cannot say probiotic. You'll be shunned. Right? I go to the conferences all the time. They're looking to genetically alter the bacteria to produce the desired chemicals. So you take a genetically altered bacteria and put it in your body. It could even produce a prescription drug. So a lot of drugs are produced through fermentation processes.
Is that scary? Starting to genetically alter microbes.
It's creative.
Yeah, it's creative for sure, but I start to feel like an experiment.
It is, but it's the pharmaceutical approach to health.
Yeah.
Right? You manipulate the machine with the sledgehammer. You don't tune it up.
Yeah.
You manipulate it. On the other hand, the dietary supplement industry certainly is, everybody has a probiotic, and if you don't, you're working on it.
Right.
You just need a little more time. Unfortunately, if you do a man on the street or you go out on the corner and you ask people, what is a probiotic? They'll stare and they'll think and they'll say, well, isn't that a yogurt or something like that? Well, what do they do? Their level of understanding of what probiotics is far beneath what the industry is kind of assuming. So there's a lot of effort being put into very technical clinical trials with probiotics to demonstrate improvement in the integrity of the lining of the gut, these tight junctures, and inflammation and all these things. It's way beyond the understanding of any consumer. That clinical data does very little to support a brand per se from a marketing perspective.
In general, do you think that that they're valuable? In other words, I hear controversy around can the probiotic actually get through the stomach, and is it really delivering the benefit, or is it all?
Yeah, that's a good question, and they really are under attack right now. I was in a doctor's office the other day. I was telling a patient that, we know now that probiotics can be harmful, and you can get an colonization, and it could be dangerous. That's from one mouse study that came out, 6 months ago with a clear bias against the unregulated sale of probiotics.
Right.
It was a hit job, right? And it's successful.
Well, incidentally, so because I'm seeing that about coconut oil too, right? Now, the more people are trying to say that this is a bad thing as compared to a great thing.
Well, they have to move on to the next thing.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Discredit the last thing.
But because you're somebody who's a literature reviewer, I mean,
Yeah.
that this is a big part of your life for so many years. Maybe you could speak to how political the published science can become.
Oh, yeah. Well, peer review is not a perfect process. Peer review is the process in which a journal will have a number of experts in the field review new research before they're willing to publish it. Some of those reviewers will actually read it, other ones don't. It can pass by. An example of that recently was some papers that were nonsense papers published. For example, one was about dog rape culture in parks. And it was published.
And it got past peer review?
It was published,
Oh
yes.
my God.
And did some heads roll for that? Yes, absolutely. But it demonstrated a point that there's a lot of bias in medical publishing, and it's not perfect.
Well, you just used the term hit job.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay, so literally something was published about overcolonization as a result of probiotics.
In mice.
Which
Right.
somebody had an agenda to want to, plant a seed of doubt in the
Right.
whole probiotic world. And it passed peer review, got in there.
Yeah.
So I guess the point is, we try to say, hey, there's standards and there's got to be peer-reviewed literature with a certain amount of, blinded controlled trials that, will bring this to the surface. But simultaneously, you can't really trust that process either.
Well, nothing's going to be perfect.
Right.
And anytime you have bias, and just human nature, you'll have bias. You can claim you don't,
Right.
but you're going to have
It's
bias
inescapable.
in the way you interpret the data and present it. The media will take either the headline or a single line from the conclusions that the authors wrote.
Right.
And that conclusion is, this study means this.
Right.
Right? And then the title is like unto it, right?
Right.
So the media just gets literally what that researcher thinks that experiment meant, providing no information as to what was actually done and why the results might be the way they are.
And I find this to be a big issue. And again, for the average consumer, there's no way they have the wherewithal or the
No.
time to want to get into this. But what you just said, I find to be profound in my experience, saying that people who just try to take a soundbite out of an abstract or a soundbite out of the conclusion and say this is what was studied,
Right.
what was learned or what was discovered, is typically a complete misrepresentation as to what the
Absolutely.
actual research is.
Absolutely.
So now it defines a problem, and I'd love for you to speak to this. The problem is that consumers have a desire to want to invest in their health.
Yeah.
And they have a desire in part to put some of that investment or a large part of that investment into supplementation.
Yes.
And there are bad actors out there. There are high integrity people out there. If somebody is watching us right now and they're
Yeah.
saying, okay, you've defined the landscape to a large degree. What can I do to try to separate good stuff
Yeah.
from bad stuff?
Well, at the simplest level, buy products that you could trust. Now, how do you know you can trust it? Well, for one, if you buy a large brand product, right, a brand that you would find, in a large box chain, for example,
A big pharmacy store.
big pharmacy, big grocery, big box
Right.
channels. The companies who are making those products cannot afford to have legal action brought against them. It will cost them tens of millions, if not $100 million,
Right.
right? They will abide by all the rules. GMP, true claims, substantiated claims, and because of the actions of a few years ago of the New York Attorney General bringing a case against some supplements, the retailers were then also brought into that lawsuit.
Wow. So
After that time, retailers are now demanding of the companies who want to sell their products on their shelves that they provide them with the substantiation for their claims. That was my job, is to go into those retailers and say, here's why we think we can say what we're saying.
So let me ask this based on that. I've got some experts saying, those multivitamins that are sold on TV
Yeah.
and they drive people straight into the big box stores to buy them,
Yeah.
et cetera, but they're crap. You're creating expensive urine. You're just wasting your money,
Yeah.
because they're cheap. What's your view? Are those multivitamins that are pushed out there in a very commercial way on a mass scale? Are they crap or?
Well, if you have a nutrient deficiency, even the worst multivitamin mineral will fix that nutrient deficiency.
Really?
Yeah.
Fix it. I mean, not
Yes.
just.
Yes. The components in the vitamin and mineral are absorbed into the body, and if they're water soluble, quickly go into the body's fluid and out the kidneys, and yes, back in the toilet. However, it's assumed that you're also eating food,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it is a dietary supplement
Right.
that you're adding to a nutrient deficient or insufficient diet. So you don't have to have 100% of whatever's in this product get in. You just need to supplement the food that you're eating. And large studies have been done to look at what percentage of the population in the United States is nutrient deficient. We eat a ton of food, right? And even eating nutritionally poor food, if you eat enough of it, you end up with adequate amounts of nutrients.
Right.
And that's really kind of the situation that the United States is in. Now, there are instances, particularly in the elderly and children, people who are extremely active, whatever, obsessive dieters, all those things, who do and should supplement their diet because they're intentionally or unintentionally not eating adequately. But again, the complaints against, just that generic hard tablet that you see that you can buy in a cheap bottle at the grocery store really are unfounded in that if you take too much of that hard pill, you could experience a nutrient toxicity if you ate the whole bottle, right? And nobody would argue with that. Well, of course, you ate the whole thing. Well, wait a minute. A minute ago, you're telling me nothing gets in, and now you're telling me you do agree that if you took too much of this product, that you could get a toxicity issue with some of these products. You can't have it both ways.
Right.
Either it doesn't get in or it is getting in.
Yeah, and maybe it's not 0 and it's not 100%, right?
Yes,
And I think
yes.
so. Now it's the next question is, okay, so now I got the cheap multivitamin that we're just describing
Yeah.
that is in the big box stores. It's got the label, all the stuff is there, and it's advertised as such. If I take that and put it next to a premium product that's a multivitamin, am I going to have better bioavailability and more absorption of the premium product as a rule or no?
Not as a rule. The thing about absorption, physiologically speaking, magnesium is kind of a big one in this. There's different forms of magnesium or calcium, magnesium oxide or magnesium glycinate or, different forms do have different levels of bioavailability. But the body is not a static machine. It's a biology. It's analog, and it adapts. If you're consuming food that has a limited availability of certain nutrients, it changes itself to increase absorption of that nutrient to accommodate the limited availability. If you then switch to a diet or a product that has very bioavailable nutrients in it, the body will adapt and begin to absorb and excrete more of that, absorb less and excrete more of that nutrient.
So the body's really smart.
That's how we made it this far, right? So we don't have as much control as we think we do. Our body just doesn't take everything we put in it for its own sake. It has its own way of protecting itself and maintaining homeostasis, so we don't kill ourselves, right? Now, that's not to say that there aren't higher or lower quality products out there. But the real nutrients that people need are not really going to be in those vitamin and mineral supplements anyway. They're all the other things that are in fruits and vegetables besides the vitamins and minerals. Turns out all the health benefits of fruits and vegetables turn out not to be the vitamins and minerals. We have plenty of those in the environment.
Right.
It's the polyphenols and other phytochemicals that are in those products that really are contributing to human health. That's another trend, polyphenols, right? And the microbiome metabolizes polyphenols to produce the active compounds that produce real health benefits. So the challenge is to repair people's microbiomes so they can actually get the benefits from fruits and vegetables. Recent research has shown that we are not the same, and based on your microbiome, you may or may not derive the benefit from that fresh fruits and vegetables.
So and this is, I guess, the interesting thing is that we're looking at one side of the equation, saying, okay, what's the supplement? Is it a high quality, a premium, a low quality? But there's also the other side of it that says, well, who's the person taking it?
Absolutely, and
Right.
you can't separate that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go so far as to say, well, everyone's different, so you're starting with a blank slate with each new person. That's not true. But as far as things that are particularly associated with either male or female and the gut, how it metabolizes those compounds, there's a lot of variation. And, the statistics aren't really telling. They'll say, oh, well, people who take dietary supplements are healthier than people who don't. So hence, dietary supplements make you healthy. Well, people who take dietary supplements are living a healthier lifestyle
Right.
because they care about their health. And so there are traps that you can fall into by, in support of dietary supplements, and the same, flip side of the coin against dietary supplements. And that's what I try to keep people from doing is, don't jump to the extremes. Reality is always somewhere in the middle. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If it sounds ridiculous, it probably is. But just to finish that thought, the thing that creates this problem in the first place is the general lack of understanding of how bodies work. We don't teach it in schools anymore. Very basic biology, right? And people come out of school literally with no understanding of how their bodies work. You can tell them anything, and they'll believe it, right? If you do this, then this is going to cause this to happen, and that's it. Okay. Who am I to argue with that? The body is a black box. And whenever you have a situation like that, you will get a Wild West industry that can say whatever it wants because people don't have the wherewithal to know. And you asked that question earlier, what can they do?
Right.
Well, the first one is stick with a well-respected company, a brand that they trust. The next one is, unlike even 20 years ago, information is available. You can find sources that are interpreting that research in an objective way to say, this is what this is saying. You make your own decision, but this is what this is saying. And that's where people kind of need to try to find is, where is somebody who can interpret the research for us in a way that we understand and can trust. An example would be examine.com. I didn't want to name anybody, but that's really, it's an example of a group that got together, nonprofit, to say, okay, somebody has to be a go-between between all the research and all the marketing that's going on between dietary supplements. They took it upon themselves to do it. When they did it, I went, oh, I wish I could have done that. But that's just an example. Sure. It's accessible to the average person, and people shouldn't expect it always to be easy. You may have to put in some time, learn something, read something, do something hard, right? You know what I mean?
Full effort.
Put in some effort,
Yeah.
and you will come to know,
Yeah.
and you will have more confidence, and you may be of benefit to your friends who have the same questions.
Yeah.
But that's really the only thing you can do. You either have a company who you absolutely trust blindly, or you take it upon yourselves to do the research yourself, figure out how to recognize the wolves in sheep clothing from the sheep, and that's the best you can do.
So this has been a great overview of this whole crazy industry called the supplement industry. I learned a lot, so thank you. I guess, are there any last thoughts you have to leave people with before we conclude our conversation?
I think it would be, I often hear critics of dietary supplements portray consumers of dietary supplements as dupes, right? You're gullible, the old joke that the wagon comes into town, opens up the sheet and says, oh, come here, I got this tonic here, cures gullibility. I'll take 2, right? Well, we're not all dupes, right? I've spent most of my adult life reading research from academics who have no interest in the financial side of dietary supplements. They're pursuing their passion to understand the body and understand how nutrients in our environment affect our metabolism. Having done that, I'm still a fan of dietary supplements. I've seen all there is to see behind the scenes, how they're manufactured, where they come from, how they're marketed, how they're regulated, and the research concerning their efficacy. They're not all great. They're not all effective. But there's enough there to have a meaningful impact on people's health if they're willing to take a little time, learn for themselves some basics of it, try to turn down their gullibility knob a little bit. So I guess, no, you don't have to be gullible. You can be very educated and an insider. I take a lot of supplements. I take too many supplements. I have bottles all over my house. My wife's always complaining about, because I love the notion that there could be something that could really help.
Yeah.
And I think people who are optimistic about that too and want to do something good for their health should feel fine about pursuing dietary supplements and including them in their lifestyle.
That's great. Well, Bryan, thank you so very much. Really great information, and thanks for the little personal share at the end. And I think that your context here that you laid out is going to help a lot of people.
Thank you. My pleasure.
A lot of great takeaways with this particular interview with Dr. Bryan Haycock. Thanks so much for tuning in. A lot of valuable information here. Let's keep this party going. So thanks for watching this, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Well, we are off to an extraordinary start here with episode 1. I know that there was a lot of information there, and you probably were trying to write notes as quickly as you could, but know also that you can support our vision and mission with Supplements Revealed by owning it. All of this great information can be in your personal health library that you can revisit over and over again. So remember that this information is not only practical for you to have today and useful, but years from now you can revisit it so that as your life is changing and your needs are unfolding, you'll have the resource to always go to be able to guide you in the right direction so you can have the best and healthiest life possible. Coming up in the next episode, we have a variety of topics that are important to you. Everything from how do medical doctors who practice functional medicine actually utilize supplementation, and then also people who have their own personal experiences who transform their life and create a purpose in this world of nutrition that's changing other people's lives. There's a lot there, and I can't wait to be there with you for all of it. So you're going to love hearing these people, and you will also be fascinated by the information that they bring you. I look forward to being with you in the next episode.
It's really easy to run the test to see things like, do I have enough magnesium? Is my methylation working properly? Am I detoxifying well? And when you are able to address each part of detoxification, which really is running on nutrients, and so many people are deficient, it all works much smoother and is more effective.
It's better to actually spend the money, get the right tests, and supplement and use supplements as an adjunct to a super healthy diet so we can have this unprecedented opportunity in human history to push that envelope of human longevity and be super healthy in our later years.
So then when you're taking these things, what's happening is it's designed in a way in which to have parasites eat these substances and then be poisoned by them. So they're not poisonous to you, but they are poisonous to the parasites. And so then you're able to then kill the parasites that way.